Welcome to Quantum Command Radio, where we talk about all things quantum. You can visit our website at www.quantumcommand.net or subscribe by clicking the subscribe button and hit that bell button for the latest and greatest within the quantum realm. Together, we will discuss topics related to quantum command, wellness, and explore all the new discoveries within this work. And now, let's go quantum.
Hey guys, Natalie Morse with Quantum Command here. And today I want to talk to you about the coronavirus. As you probably have noticed, I've not said anything about the coronavirus. I haven't made any broadcasts. I've been pretty quiet actually in the last couple of weeks. I haven't done very many broadcasts at all. And I do that on purpose. When I see an event going on that's live streaming through the media, I typically take a couple steps back and I don't make any comments about it or even really talk to clients about it until I've seen it come through, through the clients that I have through my door. So for a while there, while this coronavirus epidemic was happening in China, there wasn't really much going on with my clients. I wasn't seeing it in any of my clients at all. So I thought, well, this is a localized situation and I already know how viruses work. So I didn't really see any alarm bells. There was nothing I felt like I should be worried about, even with my own kids. So essentially, what I want to talk about today is why I'm not afraid of the coronavirus and why I don't think you should be either. I know that we all want to be prepared. So we all sort of do our due diligence and prepare as much as we can by stocking up on whatever we think we should in order to get prepared for something like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I stopped being afraid of these epidemics when I started being able to ask the body questions and find out what was really going on. When you can ask the body what a virus that came into the body is made of and comprised of, and you begin to pick apart its different elements and what it's made of, you stop being afraid because you realize what it is. So I hope to communicate some of that today so that people can feel a little bit more informed about what's really going on with the coronavirus. So let's talk a little bit about what we've seen so far. So what we've seen is a bunch of reports from a communist nation, China, and we're getting a bunch of reports of there being a massive pandemic, lots of people dying. We're seeing videos of people going out in the street, and the streets are totally deserted. They're completely empty. There's no one going out to shop. There's no one going to work. Everything's quarantined and locked down. We're seeing videos supposedly snuck out of China of packed ERs, if they have ERs in hospitals. I saw a video of a woman or a person, I don't know if it was a woman, draped in some type of blanket, having what looked like a grand mal seizure, and nobody was helping her in this packed ER. So we're having all these different reports, and we really have absolutely no context. We have the context of the data that we're getting from the communist nation, from China, from the state media. That's it. We're getting very little feet on the ground reports about what's really going on. And how much of the information do you think you can trust coming out of a How many of these numbers do you think are actually accurate? They could be completely inflated. They could be completely deflated. They could be completely minimized. We actually have no context whatsoever. We barely, in America, the freest country on this planet, we barely have enough context for any type of false flag event that happens over here. I mean, how many false flags have happened over the last 4 to 5, 6 years? And we have no context whatever of whatever happened. I mean, Las Vegas is a perfect example, and I'm not going to really get into any of those discussions right now. But what I want you to see is that we have no context of what's going on. We have no understanding of why that person was having a seizure. We have no understanding of why these ERs are packed. We have no idea what the cultural context is over there and what they're really experiencing. We only know what the state media tells us. That's it. And that's kind of what our experience is too. If we didn't have like 2 or 3 different news outlets that were alternate news, all we would know is the state-driven media outlets information. That's it. So I just want you to first understand or hear that these reports of people having heart attacks and these people having instant death from getting this pathogen, we actually do not know that context. I'm not saying that's not happening. I'm just saying context is everything, especially when relating to a pathogen or a toxin. That's the first piece. I've seen the coronavirus come into a couple of my clients in the last month. I think I've had a total of like 4 or 5. There've really not been that many. And I'm going to break apart here in a second what this thing is made out of and why certain people are having different reactions to this virus in different and more severe ways than others. I've actually run into a pathogen like this before and seen how detrimental it was to my clients and figured it out and helped them recover. And we had a whole mess that was like the coronavirus a couple of years ago when we had Hurricane Irma. And when Hurricane Irma came through, they put a hybrid pathogen in the mix of all that. And a lot of my clients during that time, everyone, of course, had quantum release. A lot of my clients crashed and burned. And it took me a month to figure out what was going on, why people were reacting so strongly. Once I figured it out, we started to intervene and my clients started to recover very quickly. But it was very messy and it was very complicated and it was very difficult, to be quite frank, having to unwind all this garbage that they put in the skies for us to breathe. So a little bit of that happened with some coronavirus clients that I had in the last month, but I will tell you that I'm not seeing very many. So we'll start out first with, let me explain why there's so much panic with these pathogenic false flags. Number one, you can't see it. You have no idea if you've gotten it. You have no idea who has it. And you have no idea, is it being sprayed on us? Is this a naturally occurring pathogen that you can give from one person to another? You can't tell if you have it. You can't tell when you've breathed it in. You don't know what the symptoms are going to be like. Are you just going to fall over dead in the street? Or are you going to have like a normal flu reaction? Because no one can tell you, because all the information you're getting is from a state-run media outlet. So from what you're hearing, people are dropping left and right, dead like flies over in China, and they're shutting entire cities down the size of New York City, and no commerce is happening, all because of this pathogen. And the death toll is climbing. And so we don't know, is this something that's going to come over through airplanes or how is this all going to, so we just can't see. We can't see any of it because we're just like normal people doing our job, going from place to place, riding in our cars, going to airports, going to bus stations, going to public bathrooms. And at any minute, we just think at any second, we could just be getting this pathogen. And that adds to the fear. The whole idea of being unknown is what adds to this pandemic type fear. And I stopped having that. I stopped having that fear when I found out what this stuff was made out of. And because I have quantum release, and because I can scan myself and find out, okay, I did get it. Now what do I need to do? Oh, I just need to do this. Oh, okay, that's it. That's easy. And then my symptoms are minimal, if anything at all. And I can move about the cabin at free will. So it's not a big deal. But fear of the unknown is a major component. And of course, the fear that the media drives of people dying, horrible things happening. Oh my gosh, this is it. This is the big one. This is the one that's going to wipe out everyone. That's completely irresponsible journalism. It's totally irresponsible. And they do it on purpose. And fear is a big piece of that. What dispels all that fear is when you can look into the body and you can ask the body questions about viruses. What are viruses made out of? Why are they so harmful? Where do they go into the body? What are they comprised of? Is there anything embedded in these viruses? Is there anything attached to these viruses? Is there anything that overlays on these viruses that makes them worse, that makes people sicker? Why are viruses so functionally effective? Where do they go in the body? How long do they stay in the body? All these things can be found out with a really ninja skill muscle testing. And I'm just saying, that's what we do in the university. I teach the students how to have these ninja skills. My Southern is showing these ninja skills from Arkansas. I show my students how to do this work, how to find out whether or not your testing is accurate, how to determine what's been in the body, what kind of nutrients do you need in reference to something that's come into the body. So those are some of the things that's why it takes a year. The first year of the university, by the way, just a little commercial, is just the muscle testing. You just learn how to muscle test a can of beans, as we joke around. If you cannot muscle test a can of beans, you are never going to be able to find technology. You're never going to be able to unravel what's going on. You have to be able to have a level of accuracy to be able to test basically a can of beans, find out if it's good or bad or not. It's boring and it's frustrating and it's mundane, but you learn a ton of information by figuring out how to correctly test. And that's the difference between this muscle testing and all the other muscle testing that's out there. Is I have formed extremely different questions that the body can answer in order to find out what these things are made out of. So that's what dispels all this fear, is once my clients find out what's really going on with this coronavirus, they kind of go, oh, well, that's not a big deal. It's just like any other virus that you've seen. Like, basically, yes, there's a couple different components, but essentially, yes. So that's what I want to talk about. So let's unpack what this coronavirus is. So I've had about 5 people have it, and they've ranged in symptoms of severity. So let's just talk a little bit about it. The first thing you need to know about is what a virus is. Now, all of you guys are going online right now. I can hear you typing. What is a virus? Is Natalie right about this? So when you ask the internet what a virus is, it's going to be a little bit different than what you're going to get with when you ask the body what a virus is. A virus, based on what the body tells you, is its genetic material. That's it. And in our case, viruses are weaponized genetic material. Every virus, with no exception, is a weaponized piece of genetic material. There's this funny little thing that goes on the internet where they have this little debate about whether viruses are alive or dead. And they just say, well, they're just non-live, they're non-living. That's because they're genetic material. They're like basically computer code that's been sliced and diced together, put together, and created. That's it. Bacteria are not really like that. Parasites are not really like that. Fungus that you get in your refrigerator, they're not like that. They're living organisms. Viruses are a man creation. They are not, in my opinion, normally occurring in our environment. They're created by man. So there's my first YouTube strike. So if you understand that viruses are weaponized genomes, that means that in order for a weaponized genome to surface in an environment, man has to have caused that to happen. So there's a creator behind that sequence of genomes. Now, here's why I believe that viruses are weaponized genetic material. About 2 years ago, I was trying to figure out why all my clients were constantly getting viruses all the time. It seemed like they were breathing them in all the time. I didn't understand what was going on. I had no idea. And every time I worked on a virus, this is another sort of like piece of information, so hang out in there. Every time I worked on someone that had a virus, the virus had 3 things attached to it or coded over it: mercury, plutonium, and uranium. So envision this. You have a sequence of genetic material, right? And on top of that genetic material, coding that genetic material, is mercury, plutonium, and uranium. I never understood this. I didn't know why this was happening. I didn't know I was discovering this. But in order to navigate getting rid of the virus, I had to address the heavy metals that were attached to this virus. So I would do that. I would get rid of it, and the client would feel better. That's all I would do. I would not recommend supplements. I would not recommend tinctures. I would say, okay, you're done. And then in a couple of days, a day or so, they'd feel better. And all I did was work on them, and they got consistent results. So I knew I was right because I was getting consistent results. I just couldn't figure out why there was mercury, plutonium, and uranium attached to weaponized genetic material in the body that they breathed in. Now, all of you red pillars are going, Natalie, it's the chemtrails, stupid. It's the chemtrails. Okay, well, I didn't believe in chemtrails then. I didn't believe that that's what was going on. I had no idea because I didn't have proof. I knew they were getting as an inhalant. I didn't understand why the weaponized genetic material had the heavy metals in it, but all I knew is that my clients had it. So it was my responsibility to try and fix the problem. So I did, and they would feel better. But they would constantly get these pathogens, these viruses, and they would be different from time. Sometimes they'd be adenoviruses, sometimes they'd be influenza, sometimes they would be a rhinovirus, sometimes they would be an enterovirus. It just depended on what the genome sequence was. That's all that it depended on. So I would constantly, in the early part of this work, what we call clear, but the body would just quantumly release these pathogens and people would feel better. Then one day, I started hunting around while I was working on a gentleman, and I thought, there's just something going on. I don't understand what's happening with these viruses. I don't get it. And then I asked the body if there was anything embedded in these genomes, in these viruses. And at that time, I was still calling them pathogens because that's what you called a virus. That's what they're called. They're called a pathogen. So you just call them pathogens. And lo and behold, I found something very interesting embedded in that virus. And that something is called smart dust. And at some point, I have a 3-part series I'm going to be doing on smart dust. It's kind of in the queue right now. I haven't been able to get to it. I want to get to it soon. But smart dust is basically, and you can look it up on the internet, it's all around, basically teeny tiny microchips. It's essentially what it is. There are little microprocessors that are independent of anything else, and they self-maintain and self-monitor, and they can beam up information to AI, and they can receive information from AI. They're all locked into that quantum artificial intelligence system, and it floored me. I could not believe that I'd found the human fingerprint, and that human fingerprint was the smart dust. Because at that point, I had still sort of believed that viruses could be a pathogen and somehow they have these heavy metals, but I just don't understand why. I don't know how this works, so we're just going to go with it. And then when I found the smart dust embedded in the virus, I went, oh, this is all being programmed. Now I understand. And so now when I find chemtrail-oriented stuff, 99.9% of it has smart dust in it. Almost everything that they put in our body is embedded with smart dust. It's a very handy way to track something live stream constantly. And like I said, at some point I'll get to that in some other broadcasts. I just haven't had time to do it. So this is what a virus is comprised of. A virus is comprised of a genome sequence that's been created. Inside that genome sequence is basically a computer chip, a little tiny computer, essentially, tracking that pathogen, where it goes, its location, its effect on the body. And it can also, that smart dust can also manipulate the genome so that the genome can change expression once it's in the body. So if it comes into the body and there's already a program running and that program's not going to work for that particular person, it can just change the program using the smart dust. It's like having a little remote control on the piece of genetic information. The mercury and plutonium and uranium, those attachments are there encoding the DNA sequence to protect the DNA sequence from the body. How hard is it to detox mercury and plutonium and uranium, do you think? You think it might be hard? As my clients will tell you, it's hard enough to quantumly release this stuff when it comes in through supplements. But when it comes in and it's coding a DNA sequence, it is very difficult for the body to basically dissolve, get rid of, so that it can then break apart the DNA sequence in the body that's causing the symptoms. And then it has to get rid of the smart dust. It has to dissolve all of those things. has to break all those things apart. And if you get 1,000,000 of them and they're all in the respiratory system, how long do you think you have before your body is just overtaken by symptoms? The mercury and the plutonium and the uranium coat the DNA sequence so that the body cannot easily dispose of that genetic material. So it stays in the body the longest it can stay in there and provide the most symptoms possible on the longest timeline possible. And so at some point, the body can't get rid of the symptom causing genome sequence, the virus, and it can't get rid of it faster than the symptoms overtake the body. And then you have basically a genome delivery system that has a profound impact on the body and causes system failure. So yes, it can cause seizures. A virus can cause seizures. A virus can cause a flu outbreak like in your body, like you have the flu. It can cause body aches. It can cause thyroid disruption. It can cause whatever AI programming programs that smart dust to affect that genome to do. These are highly programmable strands of genetic information. And when I started to figure all that out, I began to find smart dust in everything. I mean, if there's any piece of technology I've found in the body, most of the time it's got smart dust embedded in it. But particularly viruses. Those are the biggies. Those are the big weapons. And basically, every year, what they do is try and just figure out which one is the most virulent, which is the one that causes the scariest symptoms. So when they talk about you getting a flu vaccine, they're basically creating theater to reinforce what they're putting in the body to make us sick. And then if they put technology in that vaccine that turns off any viruses that would come into the body, well, yay, you didn't get the flu that year. Aren't you just so lucky? Or you just actually didn't get the flu. There was no flu shot. There's nothing in that flu shot, and you didn't breathe in the flu that year. Or, and there's a myriad of iterations of what you could be doing every year. And I mean, I've had people that have gotten the flu shot and got an empty vaccine. There's nothing in it. It's all theater. It's all programs. So that your response to something going on is a knee-jerk reaction of, oh, I need to get a vaccine. When are they going to fix it? When are they going to make a vaccine for this? When are they going to, I wish they'd create a vaccine for this, this, and this. We've already have it in our vernacular. If there's a problem, we want them to make a vaccine for it. We beg for that because they've programmed us to line up and get these injections to solve problems that they created. That's right. I said it. They're creating the vaccine. They're creating the virus problem that then they respond to with a solution that programs us to be dependent upon the state for solutions. And we're helpless. I mean, who can stop them from spraying us with this stuff? Honestly. I mean, I'm working on it. I've been working on that problem. I think there's quantum infrastructure that I think can be stopped. I just haven't figured it out. I mean, but the virus problem is something that's been ongoing, and many of those grids are down. So when I saw the coronavirus happen, I said, well, there's only one way that could have happened. They locally sprayed a region. By the way, the mercury, plutonium, and uranium also assists in the virus actually surviving any aerosolization problems that happen, climate problems. It's too hot, it's too cold. The heavy metals on the outside, coating the outside that genome, helps with the DNA basically not breaking apart and evaporating. So we breathe it in. Okay. So why is the coronavirus any different? Well, it's not really any different. There's a couple of changes that they did to this virus that make it particularly scary, but it's workable and it's not devastating, particularly if you have quantum release. So let's talk a little bit about what's the differences. So This pathogen is a typical virus strand of genetic material. And I think like I said, I had about 5 people that had it. There's a couple of iterations. One iteration is it's a virus with smart dust embedded in it, but no heavy metals attached to it. All right. So people that are getting that, my clients that are getting that and are quantumly releasing it are barely feeling it. Maybe a day where they get a stuffy nose or something. Like I said, I haven't seen the coronavirus in like a week or two. So that's a really actually notable. And about half of my clients, 2 out of 5, almost half, 2 out of 5 of those clients that have had it, both of them were in Canada, if that tells you anything. A couple were in Ohio, and then I had another one in Texas. So, and there just have been very few. I mean, with epidemics like the E. coli pathogens that come in through the produce and stuff, sometimes I'll have anywhere between 7 to 10 to 15 clients in a couple of weeks getting this stuff. And then you'll see it on the news. So I generally see this stuff really quickly, very, very fast. But this has just been like eerily quiet, hardly anybody. So, one iteration is just the virus strand, just the genome with the smart dust embedded and nothing else. So typically what happens is you quantumly release it and you're done. There are very few symptoms. You might have the sniffles. That's it. And it also depends on how many you get. If you get a bunch, you're going to feel a little bit more symptoms than if you don't. Because remember, when genetic material comes into the body, we're forced to read it. Because we're genome readers. That's what we are. As humans, we are forced to read genomes that come into our body, good, bad, or ugly. So we bring in that we see that sequence come into the body and we have to sort of obey it, kind of like a player piano. Basically, it obeys the sheet music. One day you want classical music. That's cool. That's what we're going to do. The next day you're going to have country music, bar music, you're going to have that. The next day you're going to have jazz. Okay. But the player piano responds to whatever the sequence is on the paper. It really just gets played by the notes, honestly. And so that's what happens with these genome sequences. They are iterated, they're produced to create a particular outcome. So one virus might be a country song, one virus might be a classical song, or one virus might, basically target a particular genome sequence in our body that shuts off respiratory function or decreases it or turns off our magnesium function for 24 hours or keeps us from being able to absorb iodine or something like that will drop our nutrients and make us sick and make us have symptoms. Wiggling any of those potentialities, like with DNA or with nutrients or with hormones or neurotransmitters, are going to cause some symptoms to some degree. So that's the first iteration. And remembering that we are genome readers, we're DNA readers, that helps you understand why they pick genomes in order to be weaponized to affect our body, because we have to read it until we can get it out of the body. So that's the first iteration, just a genome with smart dust. There's few symptoms there. Then the second iteration is the genome sequence, the coronavirus sequence with the smart dust embedded, and it's overlaid with the mercury, plutonium, and uranium. So that's going to be a little bit different, heavier symptoms, right? Even with quantum release, that means some really nasty material came in through that pathogen. So yeah, you're going to quantumly release it, but it's going to hit you a little harder, and you're probably going to notice. All right. And again, you're going to read that genome, even though it's coated in that heavy metals, in that armor, you're definitely going to be reading that and you're going to be affected by it. And another way that these viruses will affect you is it'll drop a thyroid hormone, or it'll drop somatostatin, or it'll drop a particular hormone to get everything off for like 24, 48 hours, long enough to get you scared, long enough to get you into the doctors, long enough to get you an antibiotic, and to buy in and program you into this false flag event. The third iteration is the most serious iteration that's causing the most symptoms, and I'm going to break down why that is. You have the genome sequence with the smart dust embedded in it, with the heavy metals attached to it, but instead of uranium, regular old-fashioned uranium, you get uranium-233. Now, uranium-233 is different than your good old-fashioned uranium that comes on the normal viruses. And the reason, I know this is boring. Hang in there. There is a method to my madness here. But this third iteration that has uranium-233 on it is a lot more dangerous and can cause some more acute symptoms that are scary. And this is why. Uranium-233 is naturally radioactive. When you have a radioactive substance come into the body, it of course radiates things. And so what is it going to radiate? It's going to irradiate. One of the things that happens during nuclear events is you take potassium iodide, supposedly to keep you from getting your thyroid irradiated, supposedly. But what really happens is when you have radioactive material in the body, it does take the iodine that's in the thyroid and it makes it radioactive. It just does that. So now you have a pathogen in the body that is in the body for maybe 10 days. And each day your body is irradiated and your iodine is turning to radioactive iodine. Now, if you're a quantum release person, if you have quantum release, your body's quantumly released that radioactive iodine just like that. As soon as it turns radioactive, it's quantumly released, and so is all the coronavirus in the body. But the problem is now you have zero iodine in the body because it's been nuked and your body just quantumly released the damaging iodine, and now you have zero iodine. If you don't have quantum release, then you have a pathogen that has radioactive material on it, controlled by smart dust, and you also have radioactive iodine in the body that now the body's being forced to detox. And any new iodine that you store in your thyroid becomes radioactive as long as there's pathogens in the body. So in order to combat that, if you have quantum release, all you do is go on iodine. You supplement with iodine because it's really hard to get iodine in the body through your diet. Basically, we eat nothing these days that have iodine in it. And a lot of us have swapped over from the iodized salt to that Himalayan sea salt or not sea salt, but Himalayan red salt or whatever, or sea salt. And none of that has iodine in it. They put iodine in iodized salt. That's why it's called iodized. So a lot of us natural people don't do that anymore. So we don't even get iodine through a salt anymore, which is a very common way to get it. So I've recommended my clients before to just have a bottle of liquid iodine from Trace Minerals. That's a really good one on their shelf just to have in the case of these kinds of events. Because when you need iodine, you need it right away. It's really hard to get to the store and go get it because you're exhausted, you're tired, you don't feel good. And when your iodine drops, that turns your thyroid basically off. When your iodine goes down to zero and you have nothing left, you do not have a functioning thyroid. And I have seen the most extreme symptoms from people who have gotten the coronavirus with the uranium-233. Their iodine drops and they have extreme symptoms that they would go into the ER for. They're calling me and going, "What do I do?" And I go, "Holy smokes, your iodine's zero. Well, you got iodine laying around? Man, you need to go ahead and and I would just tell them we'd measure it out, find out how many they need, and they'd put the drops on their skin or they'd do it orally. They take it orally. Because that's the main thing that is causing the extreme symptoms. That drop in iodine, which turns off the thyroid, which usually pings, right? The adrenals, there's that pituitary, thyroid, adrenal axis. And those three glands ping one another and they form an axis that communicates. So when the thyroid goes offline, then the adrenals get crashed. Then the pituitary gland crashes. Everything starts to crash. And if you're already weak, and if you already have like diabetes, or if you already have a heart condition, or if you have a blood sugar condition, guess what? Those conditions are going to be further worsened by your thyroid just disappearing, essentially going offline until you get enough iodine in your body. So that's why you see these crazy effects by this coronavirus. And sometimes people get really scary symptoms and some people don't. And what better way to study that than to spray a bunch of people on a cruise ship and then basically quarantine them out in sea for 30 days and they not be able to come back and you get to watch them and track them. Because they have smart dust embedded in all these pathogens. So you can kind of like these nice little petri dishes that just set the deep state up to know what is causing this. or not what is causing this, but what it does, how it affects the body, affects people. So that's what a virus is made of. And of the 5 clients that I've worked on, I've had 2 of those 5 clients have extreme symptoms, and both of those clients had the uranium-233 attached to it, and they both needed iodine for several days. And one of those clients got it twice, and she got it, and she needed iodine for like a week because her iodine kept crashing. And we just stayed on top of it, and she could then begin to predict it after about a day or so. She's like, okay, I can tell when my body starts to decrease in iodine again because it's trying to function and keep it at 100%, but it's losing momentum, halfway through the day, or it runs out of iodine or whatever. And you have to keep supplementing. And about a week later, we pretty much resolved all the iodine need problems. And that's why you have such extreme reactions to this pathogen, is if you get the most serious iteration that has the uranium-233 attached to it, then yeah, you're gonna nuke your thyroid. And we all know what happens when your thyroid's not working. I mean, when your thyroid doesn't work, all kinds of systems collapse. Your digestive system can't function. You can't eat certain foods. A lot of people that come my way that have thyroid issues can't eat gluten, wheat, whatever. They have heart problems, they have circulation problems, they have lymph problems, they have tons of problems, all because their thyroid's not, they're exhausted all the time. So if you're already compromised because you already have something in the body affecting those regions, and then your thyroid goes offline, yeah, it's going to cause extreme symptoms. Absolutely. And it's going to look like a pandemic. When in reality, you can't pass a weaponized DNA that has heavy metals and is technology. You can't cough and give that to another person. You can't cough technology out of your body and give it to someone else. I can't have microchips in my body and cough and spread them to someone else and someone else breathe them in. That's not how technology works. Now, that's how bacteria works. Bacteria absolutely works like that. You can absolutely have a problem with bacteria. But weaponized DNA with smart dust and heavy metals embedded or attached to them? Nope. But you can spray a population like crazy and cause all these things to happen regionally, particularly if that pathogen lies dormant for about a week and then becomes activated. AI activates it in the body. It can just cause this trickle-down effect where these regions are being hit. And they can track it and they can manifest it and they can create these dynamics that are all AI driven. Remember that we cannot trust any information that comes out of a communist country. So all this data that we're getting is through the filter of the state, and they can show us whatever they want to show us. We have no ability to have a real view of what's going on over there. And this type of fear of a pathogen sets the population up for a couple things. It sets it up again to be reprogrammed. Oh, we need vaccines. We need to have the medical system really investigate this and fix this problem. We need antibiotics. We need all these different things. When really what we need is for these pathogens or these weaponized genetic materials to not have embedded on them heavy metals and smart dust embedded and then putting in our body. That's what we really need. But when you have a pandemic or you have an epidemic or something like that happening somewhere else, you can kind of watch how the deep state works. You can watch how you're being manipulated. And I haven't really seen a ton of manipulation in the American press. I've seen them report what they're getting, but I've not seen a ton of manipulation over here. Maybe some have been a little bit extreme, but I've not really seen a lot of it because I think the American press doesn't know. I think they're not in the know of what's going on over there. I think this is my opinion about what's happening over there. I got an opinion just like everybody else, but I think this is done in conjunction with the American deep state. I think that there's still deep state running, obviously, in China. They can create these types of events, and these types of events really allows for that deep state theater to happen, for that fear and panic to really, there's nothing scarier than going out for milk and there's nobody on the street. It's extremely eerie. No one's going to school, everything's shut down, and you're forced to do it. You're forced to be part of a quarantine. You can't opt out. Generally, that you kind of get in trouble if you start to opt out. And then you get surveilled, and then you get your temperature taken, and then you're forced to wear this mask, and all this theater going on about, oh, we have an active pandemic going on, you need to participate. When I'm not afraid of breathing in a pathogen, I know when I've breathed it in, I know I've quantumly released it, and worst comes to worst, I know what it's going to do in my body because I've already seen it in 5 clients. So there's that fear and panic that program you to believe whatever you're seeing and whatever's going on. These types of events allow for the restriction of movement. So when you're under a quarantine, you can't just do what you normally want to do. And that's a deep state goal set. That's what a lot of the Green New Deal is about. And I don't want to get too political on here, but I'm just trying to tell you that that's what these events create. They create goals. They allow the deep state to have goals met so that they can do what they need to do. And one of those is to restrict the movement of humans from one city to another. It's the first thing I thought of during the Australian fires and the Californian fires. I'm like, all right, well, somebody's doing something bad because they're setting fires in the places where they don't want people. So if you want to do something bad in a large Chinese city, and you know that globally the deep state's under attack and they're trying to hide the evidence, like in Australia, I think they were just burning a bunch of evidence up, like in California. Why would China be any different? So you create all this pandemic, you lock people up in their houses, and then you can do what you need to do under the guise of state mandated media, under the guise of state vehicles, hospitals, tents, whatever. And you can move people the way you want them to be moved. And then they get in trouble if they try and move out of that area. You can actually give them consequences for trying to move. So it restricts your movement, restricts you from being able to do things that you want to do, but it allows the deep state to manipulate the population and even imprison the population beyond just being in their homes. It allows them to go into homes, pull people out, and nobody can tell, nobody can see, nobody knows that it's happening. And China's known for that kind of stuff. They're known for that type of warfare on their own people. So this also sets up one other dynamic. When deep states of different countries are working together, if you create a pandemic event in China, then remember this with Ebola? They did this with Ebola, where they had epidemics, and then everybody freaked out when Obama let a couple of people that had Ebola cross our borders and be admitted into our hospitals. They were like, that's it. We're all going to get Ebola now. Thanks a lot, Obama. And of course, that didn't happen, my opinion. Of course, I've never worked on somebody that had Ebola, but I think it's also weaponized. They can control that epidemic, I believe. That's my opinion. I don't have any proof of that because I've never worked on anybody that had Ebola. But if it follows the trend of all the other pathogens that I've seen, then that would make sense to me. But it also allows for opportunities of panic to happen in other countries. So it makes us direct our attention to other areas like, oh no, coronavirus. Oh no, Ebola. We have to close our borders. We can't let anybody from China come in. Why isn't Trump responding? Why isn't he responding fast enough? Did he respond fast enough? All these kinds of things. When in reality, the coronavirus is is all a weapon. It's just a weaponized genetic material. And if we happen to catch it in our jet stream, we may get a couple, but we're not getting it to the degree that they are. Probably because it's not super powerful by the time it gets over here. It's probably pretty weakened, I would suspect. So this coronavirus allows for the deep state to work in coordination with a panic to prevent or create restriction of movement in this region as well. Oh, well, we better not go there this year. This virus, it's really spreading. And what if we give it to the grandkids? I'd hate to give it to the grandkids. So we should probably just stay home in case we get it. Or if the deep state wants to create their own pandemic, then they can claim it's a part of what's happening in China that's moved over here. And then real panic can start. When you have multiple countries with these pathogens that are supposedly extremely dangerous, it sets it up for panic in another area, particularly in an area that you really want a lot of panic to happen because they're addressing the deep state at a deeper level than any other country. I'm talking about the United States. It also allows for the deep state to make a decision. Do we want to release some type of weapon? Do we want to release some kind of technology that can impact a huge part of the population and blame it on the coronavirus when it's not really the coronavirus? But people will just assume it, and all of the information coming from the medical system will just claim that because they're all part of the deep state too. It's all combined in there. They're all, hand in glove. They're all holding each other's hands. They're all in bed together. You can't have these technologies and the medical system react to these things with success without them colluding together. The medical system isn't just accidentally stumbling upon pharmaceuticals that turn off weaponized genomes that are AI embedded. They're just not doing it. It's not an accident. It's all coordinated. It's all part of the collusion. But, they dress up in nice white jackets and have clean surfaces and these really professional pieces of equipment and machines, and we just assume that it's all legit when they're in just as much collusion with this technology-driven nightmare as DARPA and other agencies are. So all this stuff is made, it's manufactured somewhere. And then it's put on the citizens. And the good news is that a lot of these virus programs have been collapsed by some of this technology coming off the grid. I mean, I have physically seen the lack of new viruses coming up in the States. It's extremely rare now. I hardly ever see any viruses. Most people are just dealing with run-of-the-mill technology now. They're not really getting viruses. They feel like they're getting viruses because they come down with cold symptoms, but it's usually the technology in the body interfering with hormones and vitamins, nutrients, and keeping them suppressed. So a lot of the pieces of the puzzle of the viruses in our region in the United States and on these AI grids have begun to collapse. That's why I found it so interesting this coronavirus starts popping up because I'm like, I wonder if that's a grid I've not seen before. And it could be. I mean, I think there are local grids. I think Australia's got a grid. I mean, I was working on an Australian girl, and I just think they have a little bit different iterations of grids than we do. And so we just work on folks that are in those countries so that we can try and figure out what those grids are. But the virus grid and a lot of the chemtrail virus grids, I have not seen people get new viruses in a while until this coronavirus pops up. And I'm like, I wonder if I'm going to see that. And then I've seen 5 clients. That's it in a month. That's it. I mean, most of the time, like I said, with these types of epidemics or these types of major events that are newsworthy, by now I would have had 20 to 25 clients. Easily. And my texting, I'm telling you, my phone would be blowing up every 10 minutes. Oh my gosh, I think I'm feeling really bad. I'm getting the flu. Could you check me really quick? I'm getting none of that. All of the stuff I've been getting in the last month are basically tech-driven, grid-related symptom groups as I've been taking some of these grids down. So the coronavirus is really one iteration of many types of viruses that they introduce into the environment to create an incredible amount of panic and exhaustion so that you just lose your will to fight. I mean, what can we do against pathogens that could just kill us at any moment? It's really hard to live your life when you feel like every time you turn on the news, you could just be given information that you're going to die in the next month, all because of some virus that you can't control. But if you look in the body and ask the body questions, and you ask the body questions correctly, your body will tell you what is in the body and what's ever been there. And one of the most monumental pieces of information that I figured out was that viruses are weaponized genomes embedded with smart dust, with heavy metals, mercury, plutonium, and uranium attached to them to keep them very sustain it, like to keep them sustained in the body, to keep them from being able to be broken down very quickly, and then removed from the body. And that's what they're made of. That's it, which is alarming. But I mean, for me, that's just like run of the mill these days. Just go, oh yeah, it's just another virus. But nobody knows what viruses are made out of. We think that they're just this. We could just lift open a rock, pick up a rock, and look under it, and we get this mysterious virus and die, or we get them from bats or chimpanzees or whatever. And it's bizarre. We just can't figure out how these viruses just sort of surface. They don't surface, they're created. And the main way you can see if they're created is whether or not they have technology embedded in them. The technology embedded in them is the human fingerprint. Obviously, viruses don't self-replicate and create technology within themselves. Okay, that's not what happens. The smart dust is created, the weaponized DNA is generated, very likely on top of the smart dust, and then the DNA is coated with heavy metals that keep the body from being able to access the DNA and get rid of it. If it didn't have the heavy metals in it, by the way, on it, the body would probably be able to get rid of it very fast. But they have deliberately put these heavy metals on to keep the body from being able to get rid of them, which is why it takes 14 days to get rid of the flu. Because your body just can't get rid of this pathogen. It has to break apart all the ingredients. And those ingredients are on the periodic table of elements, and it's really hard to get rid of uranium and plutonium and mercury. Are you kidding me? So that's my opinion on the coronavirus. I've not gotten it. My kids have not gotten it. My husband's not gotten it, but a couple of my clients have, and they're recovered pretty quick. It's over and done with. And there's been so few, I'd be surprised if we get any more, if I got any more clients that got it. That's why I'm not worried. Are there people that are having severe reactions? Absolutely. Two of my clients had very severe reactions because they were sort of already in a compromised state. They were dealing with another issue that had already hit them, and then they got hit with this, and it slammed their thyroid to a grinding halt, and they just got really sick very fast. But the iodine solved the problem. The iodine was what was needed to saturate the thyroid, get it back up and running. But if you just shut somebody's thyroid down, yeah, you're going to have, people dropping to their knees and shaking and feeling really, really sick. Because the thyroid is really critical to basic function, basic systemic function. So that's what I have found with the coronavirus. And I waited a really long time to do this episode because I wait before I make any judgments. Particularly, I know like Dan Bongino has this funny rule: when news breaks, you wait 24 hours before you say anything or comment on it or make any conclusions. And I do that a little bit with these pathogens that I see. I wait and I wait and I wait and I look and I watch clients and I see what they do. I see how they're responding. I see if what we're doing is working, and then I can draw conclusions. But things like this coronavirus, it takes me weeks to make sure I can speak intelligently about it because I don't want to give bad information. But every virus is the same. And this coronavirus is not a whole lot different. What makes it different is they put radioactive material onto this genome strand, and it's very, very dangerous to the thyroid. So some people get it and some people don't. So you could get the coronavirus and be over it if you don't have quantum release. If you lived in China and you got it, you could be over it in like 7 to 10 days possibly. But if you got the kind that had radioactive uranium on it, uranium-233, you're going to be sick, and really sick. ER level sick until you get rid of it. And guess what? Antibiotics don't help the body break apart heavy metals to get into that genome and finally dissolve it and get rid of it. So basically what you're doing is triage until you can get rid of that pathogen. I don't even worry about it anymore because I have quantum release. So, and my kids have quantum release. So I know even if I do get it, I'm going to get rid of it very quickly. I'll know it because I'll feel it. And then I can assess my nutrients and say, all right, what's low? Oh gosh, it knocked out my magnesium and calcium. Hey, you know what? I've got that on hand. I keep that on hand. I'm going to go ahead and take that. And I would recommend you guys keep stuff on hand. The basic stuff I keep on hand is Shaklee Vital E, and a lot of these are Shaklee products. I do the Shaklee Vital E. I keep that on hand. I keep B complex, Shaklee B complex on hand. I keep the Sustain C. It's like a sustainable release C from Shaklee. I use the Jarrow Bone Up, which has magnesium, calcium, and D3. I have enzymes on hand in case people have digestive problems. I have the Jarrow tocopherols, which I think is A and E. I can't remember, but it has the fat soluble vitamins, A and E, I think, in there. So that helps if you get a physical injury because A and E really helps there. And then I keep a couple things like peppermint on hand. I have a couple essential oils that helps in a pinch. I have iodine. I always keep iodine on hand. I have it in a tincture. I have it in Trace Minerals is the brand I get, and I put it on my skin. It's just fine on the skin. The skin totally absorbs it. Or you can drink it. You can put it oral, in water, whatever, and drink it. I keep that on hand. Those are the basics that I keep on hand. I keep charcoal in hand. That helped when we had a trip and my daughter got a sour stomach and she quantumly released the bacteria from the bad food, but the charcoal really settled everything, settled the stomach a little bit. So, that's in my vitamin box and I check that every day, which would be beneficial to the body. And I have like a regimen that every day Vital E is good. And I take magnesium, calcium, and D3 because I'm working on remineralizing some of my teeth. So that's a focus for me right now. But if you keep those on hand, then nothing surprises you. And so people that had this happen to them because they had iodine right there, they had it right there. They could use it. And they didn't have to run out and shop while they were dead sick, halfway functioning. They didn't have to get somebody to go get it for them. They had it right there. They could immediately implement it and immediately start to feel better within 12 to 24 hours. So those are things I have on hand. Iodine's a really big deal, mainly because of the uranium. I've seen that before. And that's why I had that if you look in my YouTube videos, you can see that old potassium iodine video I did. That was because we had another event like that in Hurricane Irma. And a bunch of my clients were dropping like flies. And I was too. I got really sick because it was dropping the thyroid because it was radioactive. It was making the iodine radioactive. We quantumly released that radioactive iodine and we have no iodine in our body. And then taking the iodine made everybody feel better. It was practically miraculous. Like within 24 hours, people started feeling better. So it's a real thing. And that's why I could break apart what was going on with the coronavirus because of that. But there is a lot of scare out there that this is the new epidemic and we're all going to die. And I mean, if that was happening, I would tell you, I would say, you know what? Everybody needs to get down into their bunker and we'll see you after the nuclear apocalypse. We'll see you when I get out of my bunker, but I'm just not seeing it. That's not what I'm seeing with this virus. It's definitely weaponized. Don't get me wrong. It's absolutely weaponized. It absolutely has dangerous material embedded on the outside of it and embedded in it. It's absolutely smart dust embedded, and it has AI-driven software hardware in it. But that's what it's comprised of, and that's why I'm not afraid. So I hope that's helpful. I hope that when you can look at the news broadcast, you can see it a little bit differently. You can see it understanding that these are made and how the delivery systems work. Most viral delivery systems are aerosolizations, and we breathe it in. That's the main way to get viruses. They also inject it into sometimes through vaccines, but a lot of times when you get viruses, they're aerosolization chemtrail programs. And we just breathe them in. And that's how it works. I didn't used to believe in chemtrails. Okay. I was not a conspiracy theorist 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. I might have been 3 or 4 years ago. It's been a long time. I've been in this work for a while, I'm realizing. So, but there was a time when I did not believe in chemtrails. I was like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Why would the government spray us with stuff? That's just so dumb. Who thought that up? And then I started finding this stuff in the body and I went, oh, oops, I guess I was wrong about that. Well, at least I know. So that's the main weaponization of these viruses is through the aerolization program. You can't cough technology out of your body and somebody else breathe it in. And technology does not replicate in the body. So if you get 12 coronaviruses in one inhalant dose, like if you breathe in and you get 12, that's a common number, by the way, and you get 12 in the respiratory system, they're not going to, the technology is not going to allow that genetic material to replicate. It doesn't replicate to 24 and then 48, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the other piece is it's a static number. What you get is what you get. What your body does with it, depends on how many you get and if it has uranium on it, what kind of uranium it has, all these different, if you're already sick, if you already have problems. So that's how that works. So that's why it looks like an epidemic because a ton of people are getting it, but it's just a ton of people are breathing it in because we all breathe air. So until you stop breathing air, it's going to be really hard to avoid some of these things. But they have yet to find a virus that really kills everybody, honestly. I mean, unless you look at the 1918 virus, but I have a totally different opinion about all those epidemics, 1918 virus, polio epidemics. I have my own opinion about that, about what was really going on there. And I think most of those are technology rollouts that just basically failed or were successful, depending on how you look at it, really. But they've really not released a pathogen coronavirus-wise with this coronavirus that creates what you think it's creating. But it is creating a lot of theater, isn't it? It's a lot of Chicken Little. The sky is falling. You better get your helmets on. You better get ready. Get down your nuclear shelter and get your food and get your water and get your this. And there's nothing wrong with preparing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not begrudging that. But let's just look at it for what it is, right? So that's what I'm seeing. I know I've continued to talk and I should shut up now, but I hope that helps. I hope once you understand how viruses work, you can kind of get a sense of what's really going on out there with this coronavirus. So it's why I'm not afraid. I have myself stocked up with iodine. I got a ball of iodine and I'm not really worried about it. And I got plenty of nutrients that I'm good to go. So hope that helps. Hope that sheds some light on it. If you'd like a new client appointment, I am taking new clients now. I've got it set up so that you can do a first client appointment with me. If you'd like, I have some openings. I think I've got some openings in March for solos if you just want to do one with me. If you want to do groups, I've definitely got groups forming. And I think, this is February, it's middle of February. So March is definitely set up. All 4 of those Fridays have groups set up. So I am taking new clients now. So things are moving in the right direction. Don't forget also that if you have supplements or products that you want tested every Friday, check out my schedule. On my website every Friday, for the most part, I've scheduled get your products tested. And for a little bit of money, you just go in there, you send me your pictures, and I will test your products for you, and you got it taken care of. I have had so much positive feedback about these groups, both the group appointments, the first client group appointments, and the product testing groups, because I tend to kind of linger on the groups and I tend to answer questions, and everyone loves hanging out with one another. It makes everybody feel like, oh man, this is a community. Everybody's experiencing this. And it really normalizes your experience. You don't feel like you're such a one-off. And what was it like for you? I don't know. It's just me and her on the phone call. So I don't really know if it was any different from anybody else. But with these group calls, you can see what other people are experiencing. Hopefully you guys will sign up for that if you're interested in doing that, if you've been hesitating. So thank you guys for listening to this broadcast, and we will see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.